Alright guys, Gemini back with another video, and in this video we're going to get sick and we're going to go for a while. So grab yourself something cold to drink and grab yourself something to eat because we're going to be here for a little while. In this video, Gemini is going to give back a little bit. It's been a long time coming, a lot of short videos, and the reason why people give me shit about my short videos is because they want more. They want some of this brain right here. This wrestling mind of mine. You know, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've always just uploaded short videos because they take forever to upload in HD. But now we can get sick because I'm on my phone and it's a pretty good picture and I can go for a while. So I'm going to explain the real death of WCW for life. Alright, here we go. Okay, so WCW, they're floating right along. They're not WCW yet. They're the Jim Crockett promotion. And you know, they're making tons of cash, but they start spending, and this is like the 80s, and they start spending and they start spending and they start spending. Next thing you know, WCW or NWA under the Crockett's is starting to have all this financial problems. So they come to an agreement with WTBS, Channel 17, and Ted Turner, and somewhere around 88, 89. So Turner buys the company, and he wants to make WCW the #1 wrestling company in the world. Now, Turner, there was something about Ted Turner and WCW that just didn't click financially. They tried several different people during that time. They tried Ole Anderson running the show. They tried Bill Watts running the show. They just couldn't find the right person to manage the talent backstage. In the late 80s, early 90s, they started giving all these WCW wrestlers these huge contracts, which maybe they didn't merit or maybe they did. So WCW through 88 through 93 is losing big cash. They're losing millions and millions of dollars every year. They're not making a dime. The wrestling is great, right? But they're not making any money. And finally they get sick of losing money. They're not sure what to do. So they turn to a guy with an experience in television background. They turn to Eric Bischoff. And Eric Bischoff gets the ship right. The first thing Eric Bischoff does, you know, when he gets in there, is he starts cutting costs and whatnot, and he goes out in '94 and makes an overture at Hulk Hogan, who was filming Thunder in Paradise down there in Florida. He gets Hogan on board, and this is huge because Hogan was the hottest free agent in wrestling at the time. He had just left the WWF after this mega run. So Hogan comes into WCW, and he makes them a legit promotion. He does. Hogan solidifies WCW as a big star. So when Hogan comes in 94, 95, WCW is doing okay. They're starting to make good money. They're starting to get hot. And the people that are running WCW say, hey, let's expand this thing. Let's start really kicking Vince's ass. Now that we got Hogan, Macho Man, Big Bubba, all these former WWF guys, let's really start kicking Vince's ass. So they expand to Nitro in September of '95, and they're competing head-to-head on Monday night with WWF. WWF and WCW trade ratings for about a year, and then all of a sudden, you know, Bischoff sees this thing they got going in Japan with this NWO angle about a Japanese takeover, and Bischoff says, you know what, I got some former WWF guys, Razor Ramon and Diesel, on their way to the company. They're not happy with what they're getting paid in WWF, so they're coming over to WCW. And he gets them in. He gets Scott Hall first, and then he gets Kevin Nash. He pays them huge amounts of money for limited dates. They form the NWO. NWO rules the world of professional wrestling for years. This is where the death of WCW starts. This is where things start going downhill for WCW. The NWO from 1996 up until 1998 was the only storyline that they had going on the show that made people care. They stopped building other stars during 96 and 98. They put all their eggs in one basket. So then when the NWO went away in 98, that's when it fell apart, because they had nothing from their previous year's work. They had no other guys that they had put in the show in the previous years. It was all NWO. And at this point in 98, when the NWO disbanded and they split them and they formed the Wolf Pack and they NWO Black and White, NWO Red and Purple, whatever the hell it was, things started getting a little sketchy in WCW because the NWO had lost its magic. So now what does WCW do? You know, now that the NWO is gone, they try forming this faction in the year 2000 called New Blood, the New Blood. And it was a group of like younger wrestlers that said that they were going to go and take over. And by WCW in the year 2000, with the NWO being gone, with no stars, all the stars had gone over to WWF. Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho, Dean Malenko, Perry Saturn, Big Show. Triple H had left the company like before all this went down. But they really were hurting for mainstream stars in WCW by about 99, 2000. They really just didn't have any standout, breakout main event stars. I mean, Jeff Jarrett, yeah, he was main eventing, but he had already had his run years previous in WWF. Sid, same thing. By about 2000, Sid was their world champion. He had kind of passed his prime a bit. As good as Sid was, as much as I loved him, he had passed his prime a bit. Terry Funk was in there for a while, and Chris Benoit left because he was unhappy with the company. They tried to do the NWO again, and then by 2001 they were out of business. But the biggest detriment to WCW, the real reason why they went out of business, straight from my mouth to yours, watching this whole thing from start to finish, lack of building new stars. And I guess that kind of brings me to my point. Like, I bash on WWE for bringing in new stars all the time, but you really can't blame them. I mean, they don't want to be in the same position as WCW, so they're trying to build new stars now, so their old stars get flushed out, and they have new stars when their old stars get old, which apparently in WWE's eyes they have, because they saw what WCW did, how they made all those mistakes, you know, years previous, and they're like, whoa, we got old stars, we got to get new stars in here, we got to get some fresh faces on the show. I don't personally like it, but they saw what happened with WCW, and they didn't want to make the same mistakes. Maybe, and I've thought this for a long time, maybe if WCW doesn't form the NWO angle, and they find a different way to use Kevin Nash and Scott Hall on the show, and they don't do the NWO, possibly would they still be here today? I don't know, because it's NWO what really made them all that money short term. But they needed a long-term solution. Maybe they could have incorporated Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash as a group for a little while. But they needed more guys competing with them and challenging them. There was a few: Goldberg, Sting, DDP, you know, Lex Luger, you know. But for the most part, the NWO just came in and wiped out the roster, and it was all NWO. And none of the younger talent got any kind of push during this time. And obviously, there was talent there. I mean, there was Chris Jericho, you know, there's Eddie Guerrero, there was Chris Benoit, there was Shane Douglas was there. There was a ton of talent in WCW that they could have pushed to the forefront. And they chose not to do it. NWO got old, NWO got boring, fans got bored. I mean, they needed to look at who they were competing with at the time. They were competing with the WWF, with The Rock, with Stone Cold Steve Austin, with Mankind, who was there, with Triple H. They needed to turn up their game, big time. And it was so weird in the years 2000 and 2001. They just went back to just a basic, generic ring mat, you know, and they got away from the stuff that made WCW cool. I mean, they still had Sting there. They had Masahiro Chono. They had the Great Muta. They had so much wrestling talent. They had basically all the wrestling talent in the world, but they had one angle. And that's kind of like if you compare it to McMahon and Austin in 97 or 98 when they had their big feud. They did that feud for a while, right? But they still had other entertaining stuff on the show while they did Austin and McMahon. Austin and McMahon is what brought the crowd in to watch Monday Night Raw in WWF Attitude Era at the time. they still had a bunch of other good matches, and they still had the overall better, solid show at the time. They didn't just have Austin McMahon. That's all the WCW had was the NWO angle, even though the cruiserweights were the ones that were doing most of the work, and they were just killing it throughout the show. They were just killing it. So yeah, that's kind of what caused the death of WCW to me. It was just the non-formation of new stars, and there was a lot of stars that they could have pushed. I mean, I could take you to Road Wild '99 and Sturgis when you had Shane Douglas in the first or second match. You know, I was like, Shane Douglas, this guy just came from ECW as the world heavyweight champion, and you had Mike Awesome in there, who just was a killer in ECW. So much talent that they didn't need to overdo the NWO angle. It could have been part of the show. They could have phased it out slowly instead of just ending it. I mean, they had the Four Horsemen. I mean, the Four Horsemen rivalries with the NWO was epic. It was extraordinary. Just, I mean, so much more they could have done. So much more. If Bischoff would have gone a different way with this, we might see. Plus, okay, here's a thing that they really made a mistake on. WWE, when they hit their big show of the year, WrestleMania, it's right around when the weather's starting getting nice. It's right around when kids are on spring break. It's right around when people are starting to get in a good mood because the weather's heating up from the winter. And the WCW, their big show, Starrcade, it's in the winter when people are trying to spend all their money on Christmas. You know, the original concept of Starrcade came up. People would eat their Christmas dinner and then they would go watch wrestling at night. But as times went on, man, people were just scrapping for money. They didn't really have time to do WCW Starrcade, and the shows were bad. Stuff like David Flair turning on his dad at Super Brawl '99 and not showing up for TV the next night. Just one botched angle after another. And giving David Arquette the WCW World Heavyweight Championship belt, it just killed it. It did. It really just. I was such a fan. It was such a sad day to see WCW bought out by WWE, but it was the right thing to do considering how much alcohol I used to have to watch to be able to get through their shows. So to me, that's the real death of WCW. I hope you guys enjoyed the hell out of this video and enjoyed listening to me. Thank you so much.